Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Dodd, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of TAFE Directors Australia, and welcome to today's TAFE Talks. I'd like to welcome Dr. Gavin Lind, who is CEO of the Australian Minerals and Energy Skills Alliance, and Miss Michelle Hyde, who's Managing Director, North Metropolitan TAFE in Western Australia. Thank you for today, and thank you for being our guest speakers on the first of our sessions around apprenticeships, and today's session is around innovation and acceleration. Let's begin though by recognising the traditional owners, and in the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we are all meeting on today. For me, that's the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I pay respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to emerging leaders and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are participating today. Today's session continues our series of TAFE Talks, and today we're putting a lens on apprenticeships, something that is very important in the life of every TAFE in Australia. At these sessions, we spend time with a guest speaker, and we thank Gavin Lind for being our guest speaker and hearing from Gavin today about the Mining Skills Organisation and what it's doing in the area of apprenticeships. We also have one of our CEOs of our TAFE members always join us at one of these sessions. And today we welcome Michelle Hyde from Western Australia, and Western Australia have done considerable work in innovation and in apprenticeships. So thank you, Michelle, as well. The structure of the session is Gavin will lead off with a presentation of 20-25 minutes. He'll talk through what's happening from the mining industry skills organisation's perspective, which is very important in terms of all of us getting an idea of how all of the skills organisations are operating, but specifically in this context, in terms of apprenticeships. Then Michelle will speak, and Michelle will talk about innovative practices in North Metropolitan TAFE in Western Australia. If you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or the Q&A on our Teams platform, and the TDA team will be looking at those questions, and then I'll draw out some of those questions and ask those of our presenters in the final 15 minutes. We will conclude after an hour. So thank you again, everyone, for participating in this session this afternoon. Well, this afternoon for me, for Michelle, it's still this morning. And thank you to our two guest speakers. Let me now introduce Gavin to you. Dr. Gavin Lind is the CEO of the Australian Minerals and Energy Skills Alliance. Gavin was awarded the 2013 LH Martin Award for Excellence in Leadership and Higher Education for his work in promoting minerals education at multiple governmental, institutional and corporate levels. Gavin has held various professional roles in industry, academia and government in both South Africa and Australia. Gavin has been heading up the Mining Skills Organisation, and today he meets with us to share some of the insights that they are conducting in terms of skills for that industry and in terms of apprenticeships more broadly. Thank you very much, Gavin, for being part of today's session.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny, and Michelle, lovely to have you with us today and being part of the team to lead this important discussion. Similar to Jenny, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we're all meeting today and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present today. Today, I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. And for those that might not know where that is, it's where the Yarra River and the Maribyrnong River meet. So that's near Footscray or Yarraville, which is where I live. So good morning to those in Western Australia, and good afternoon to those elsewhere. And I am going to ask, Lyndall is kindly going to drive the slides I have. So Lyndall, if you could perhaps pop them up and we'll speak through them. But as Jenny said, the Australian Minerals and Energy Skills Alliance is the new home of the Mining Skills Organisation Pilot, which you might have heard of before. And the Mining Skills Organisation Pilot is one of 3 skills organisations funded by the Commonwealth Government And we do a lot of very interesting things. So let me tell you a little bit about that. So if we go to the next slide, Lyndall. So the Mining Skills Organization pilot, in its planning phase and development of its work plan, provided insights on the mining industry's perspectives on the VET system. Industry has a clear view on the pressure points, and these are reflected in the work that we are doing. Skills organization governance and engagement processes have given us access to industry in a way in which the current system of skills service organizations and industry reference committees could not quite deliver. And through these MSOP, which I'll call it from now on, processes there's a direct engagement with large employers that employ the bulk of the some 256,000 strong mining workforce in Australia. When you add in the mining equipment and technology services, or MET sector, this workforce grows to 1.1 million. To put it another way, 1 in 10 Australians works in the mining industry and its value chain. This from an industry whose exports contribute almost $300 billion a year, and that's close to 2/3 of Australian exports. The industry has about 9,300 apprentices and trainees, meaning that 3.6% of the operational workforce is either an apprentice or trainee, with roughly half of those being traditional trades. If my maths doesn't fail me, that means it's about 1 in 27 employees is an apprentice or trainee, which is a pretty impressive figure. At a high level, the mining industry needs further VET reform for the industry to have confidence in the VET system and its outcomes. An efficient, well-resourced VET system properly calibrated to industry need is an essential component of the jobs agenda. We need to reposition industry at the center of VET reform. And vocational education training is primarily about jobs, and it is employers that create those jobs. Through engagement, MSOP seeks to purposefully play a primary role in ensuring industry is at the center of our activities. We have a forward work plan that comprises 4 key components or project hubs, and these are digital transformation, attraction and retention, qualification reform trials, and also apprentices, which is what I'll speak about today. And we want to ensure that the mining industry has an active voice in influencing the VET reform agenda and also in its implementation. The success of the Australian Minerals and Energy Skills Alliance, AUSMESA, we're still getting used to our new acronym, and the MSOP is simple. Industry sees us as an extension of themselves. And today I'll be taking you on a deep dive into our Apprentices Project Hub, talking to you about what we want to achieve, cover the why and the how behind this, and then close by addressing some of the change management considerations associated with this Project Hub. And the next slide, please, Lyndall. So during 2019 and early 2020, the Mining Skills Organization pilot undertook national consultation with employers and other stakeholders to determine priority areas of activity for the pilot. With tradespeople comprising more than 1/3 of the direct mining workforce of those 256,000, and with this likely to increase further, it is not surprising industry has expressed a strong desire for the Mining Skills Organization to specifically explore a range of issues in apprenticeships. Our industry will continue to need trade skills, and we have a strong interest in exploring ways that we can produce tradespeople more efficiently and effectively. So this slide outlines some of the keys for our industry. Consistency is the key. In exploring faster outcomes, we need to make sure whatever approaches are explored can be replicated with consistency within the same trade area and ideally across trade areas. Next is speed to market, a theme that is reflected in a number of our project hubs. We are talking here about outcomes in less than the nominal 4-year period with no lessening of quality. It's not about leaving things out of current trade training qualifications to achieve this outcome. It's more complex than that, and I'll address this issue later. The next slide, thanks, Lyndall. So why are we doing this? It's not because Gavin Lind thinks it's a good idea, even though I do. It's because industry is and has been experiencing pressing skill shortages across a wide range of trade occupations, metal trades in particular. Hence our focus on the mobile plant, heavy duty diesel fitting occupation. Now, some may say this is reflective of industry not maintaining its effort in taking on apprentices, But this is not an issue that is specific to the mining industry. Trade skill shortages are a feature of most, if not all, industries. And I can confirm that 5% of all vacancies in mining are for the mobile plant heavy-duty diesel fitting occupation. So the problem is more systemic. What mining sector employers tell us is that the current qualification footprints require apprentices to acquire knowledge and skill that will never be fully deployed or utilized while they remain working in a resources sector environment. As teaching and learning professionals, I'm sure those of you on this webinar will realize that if you don't apply the skills and knowledge gained in what it is you're doing on the job, then it is quickly lost. This is an important issue for the mining industry. In our industry, technology adoption is accelerating at a dizzying pace. We have automated trucks, drills, trains, water carts, light vehicles with potential for more widespread application of robotics. This technological change will have an impact on skills and therefore existing workers as well as new workers. Work done for the Minerals Council of Australia on technology and skills estimated that in the next 5 years, around 77% of jobs in the sector will be enhanced or redesigned as a result of technological change. This means people will need to continually upskill and reskill to remain current. Lifelong learning will be a reality. This will also place a premium on shorter forms of skill development, such as micro-credentials. Just in time and just enough learning will become king. So as an industry, we need to get our heads around different ways of learning to make the process more aligned to the change cycles in the industry. For our target mobile plant technician occupation, that likely means a greater focus on diagnostic skills and low voltage electrical skills, the latter associated with the sensors and a range of other technology installed in mobile plant. With decarbonization being a priority across the industry, it also means creating a workforce that is fluent in managing alternative fuel sources such as batteries, natural gas, and ammonia and hydrogen. Displacing diesel as a fuel and power source is a critical part of the mining industry's decarbonization agenda, and we need to ensure the current workforce and future workforce have the skills necessary to operate in an environment that could be conventionally powered or powered by these alternative fuel sources. We also need to be attractive to potential entrants. For trades, that's apprentices, and as you all know, young people these days have pretty lofty expectations. In 4 years, a young person doesn't want to become a tradesperson, they want to become the CEO. We are developing an industry of choice framework in recognition that we are in an increasingly competitive market for skills and need to have offerings that resonate with people looking for a job or looking to change jobs. We also need to present the industry as being in step with social expectations, and a significant amount of focus is being brought to bear around ESG issues, so environment, social, and governance. This is the emerging language of our sector. Increasingly, the mining industry is being asked and required to demonstrate what it is doing in each of these areas to compete for investment and also social license to operate. The fact that according to the national data collection, over 50% of apprentices don't complete and over 30% don't even progress past their first year means we have some significant issues to deal with. I would expect some of this attrition is due to lack of alignment between the expectations of the apprentice and those of the employer. Apprenticeships have been around for over 200 years, and their basic tenets haven't really changed much over this time. To make sure the apprenticeship pathway remains relevant, we need to give it an overhaul to make sure it continues to meet the needs of employers and those who choose to pursue a trade. There is no question that an employment-based training arrangement delivers a range of positives. Skills development that occurs closer to the workplace will be more relevant and more in tune. And we have to do this within the competency-based system. That won't change, and we need to recognize that different people have different capacities and capabilities to learn, and therefore should have an opportunity to complete their training accordingly. Now, for apprenticeships, this raises some issues around time taken to practice the skill and knowledge, and that's one of the key issues we have come across so far in our consultations around faster apprenticeships. How we integrate the on and off the job components within a shorter time frame to achieve the same outcome. Can I have the next slide, please, Lyndall? Here's just some visual evidence of my previous comments, and this is an indenture from over 260 years ago. Many of the basics in a contemporary training contract can be found within this document. I think that they're just not handwritten nowadays, and somewhat indicative of some challenges we collectively have. I want to stress that as an industry, we value the apprenticeship pathway. The combination of on and off the job training does deliver a good outcome. What we need is a more flexible apprenticeship system that has greater capacity to flex in tune with the requirements of industry and the labor market. The next slide, please, Lyndall. So I've addressed why we are pursuing this agenda. So let me focus on the how. In some of our discussions around apprenticeships, people have the idea that when we talk about achieving a given outcome in a shorter period of time, that we are compressing things and either leaving parts of the trade out or skimming over them without any depth of opportunity to practice the skill and knowledge. This is what we would call faster outcomes through compression. At best, squeezing the same amount of learning into a much shorter time frame. This is not our approach. We are seeking to work with our partners, industry, RTOs, and other stakeholders to take the program or qualification fundamentally apart and then reassemble it in a way that will allow different connections to be made between discrete packages of learning to achieve a faster outcome. This is what we are calling faster outcomes through design. We also need to recognize that in a competency-based environment, people learn and absorb content in different rates, so there will always remain a 4-year nominal term arrangement as an option. In responding to industry-specific requests, we are looking at ways of getting a faster outcome. So to provide some assurances for those who have a compression mindset, we are putting in trained processes to better manage quality and therefore ensure that goal of consistency of quality in outcome. To achieve this, we're implementing a proof of point assessment regime. Sorry, a proof point, tongue ties me every time. What is this? Well, in its simplest form, think of them as mini capstone assessments that are summative. So let me explain. It's not unreasonable for an apprentice and an employer at the end of each stage of their training to know something and demonstrate their skills and this knowledge in the context of the workplace, a basic working definition of competence. So what we are doing is codifying the skill and knowledge expectation in consultation with employers, RTOs, and other stakeholders into a series of standardized assessments. They will get more complex and are summative and will assess the major fundamental knowledge and skill components of each stage of learning. Being standardized, they also provide a great opportunity for RTOs to implement a standardized way of delivering RPL, especially to those coming into an apprenticeship with pre-existing skills and knowledge. As a double block and bleed, to make sure no one falls between the cracks and we manage quality expectations, these proof point assessment decisions will be independently validated. For some, this is a big call and raises a whole pile of issues that I will address in the next slide. But from an industry perspective, it is seen as much needed quality assurance mechanism to make sure apprentices know what they should know, do what they should be able to do, and apply this knowledge and skill in the context of a modern workplace, which in this case would be a modern mine site, be that an iron ore site in the Pilbara or a coal operation in Queensland. The next slide, please, Lyndall. Faster apprenticeships is not a new concept. There are many approaches that have been tried in the past through a range of programs at the state and territory and national levels. The National Apprenticeship Program from around 2012 and 2013 in the resources sector is but one example. Yet here we are in 2021 when we still have the overwhelming proportion of apprenticeships that are delivered in the full 4-year nominal term. We must find ways of modernizing apprenticeships and continuing to make that pathway a valued pathway, but we need to do this with respect to the current system and the over 250 years of history that underpins the apprenticeship system. Hence, our change management needs to be characterized by respectful disruption. We will do this with our partners in the apprenticeship system, and that includes the union movement. In some elements of what we are trying to achieve, it is acknowledged that there will be challenges. This doesn't mean we don't do things. What it requires is an articulate expression of the benefits of what is being proposed, and given its employer-based training we're talking about, that means additional places, which means additional employment opportunities. What it also means is access to world-class technology and processes. After all, the mining sector in Australia is at the forefront of autonomous operations, and we should be able to leverage this by creating world-class training products that can support implementation of such environments in other parts of the world. This will allow us to leverage the already favorable international perspective of Australia's vocational and education training system. In my previous comments, I have highlighted the need for employers, RTOs, and other stakeholders to do things differently and to reimagine how the pathway operates and what we can collectively do to deliver the same outcome in a shorter period of time. Fundamental to this is a rebasing of relationships between RTOs and employers to make sure that we can get the consistency in outcome within a shorter time frame without any loss of quality. Apprenticeships are often integral to industrial instruments and industrial arrangements. The C10 classification in the Metal Trades Award is the classic case and the benchmark for apprenticeships in many ways. Competency-based wage progression and a range of other award-related matters are ones we will have to deal with, and we recognize that. We also need to provide unions with comfort that we can set out what we're trying to achieve with no disadvantage to apprentices. These challenges are very real, and we will deal with them and work constructively and thoroughly with parties to get that win-win outcome. We also need to be mindful of pathways and constructing pathways into and out of what is being designed. After all, it's extremely rare for individuals to stay in the mining industry for the entirety of their careers. If someone leaves the mining industry and moves into another industry, it is important that any gap training needed is clearly identified and readily available. This is particularly important for the mining industry, where a range of activities, such as engine rebuilding and overhaul, will never generally be carried out unless the employer is a large mining contractor and has their own engine rebuild facility. That skill and knowledge, however, may be critical if an individual is seeking employment in a mobile plant maintenance environment outside of the mining industry, and we have the responsibility to make sure these pathways are clear and there is knowledge and skill requirement clearly identified that will allow people to move between industries and between environments. The industry knows this is an important issue for the union movement that values broad-based training and pathways notions. This is an example of one of those issues that is currently being worked through in a constructive way with the union movement. In our consultation so far, and this goes to on-mine sites themselves, one of the things that comes up is the view that if you haven't done a 4-year apprenticeship like I have, then you are not a tradesperson. This is an important and real issue for our industry, as it's often tied to matters of safety. We will need to bring these people along with us on the journey and find ways of convincing them that the change is not only warranted, but necessary if we are to continue to attract apprentices and ultimately become tradespeople. And more importantly, that these tradespeople have an active interest in working in the resources industry. Funding is also an issue that I bet many of you are thinking about while I've been presenting. And this is not about speeding things up and reducing the funding envelope from our perspective. We are not pursuing this agenda to save money or reduce funding. We are engaging with participating states and territories on a raft of policy issues around this project hub, including RTO funding, and also flexibility in the overarching policy framework that surrounds apprenticeships. Likewise, for providers, a 4-year program provides opportunities to structure things in a predictable way, and that includes funding. Taking a different approach based on the true capacity of an individual to progress at their own rate means a need for greater flexibility in how off-the-job training is delivered. We hear too much, even in 2021, about the difficulties of block release training and how, in some cases, this doesn't meet the operational needs of the employer or the education training needs and aspirations of the employee or apprentice. So funding and flexibility will be key. And finally, the change management process and some of the issues I've outlined present some really wicked problems. We will approach the resolution of these through thoughtful, inclusive, and genuine consultation and engagement with all parties, including employers, state and territory training authorities, unions, and participating RTOs. What we are trying to achieve will take some time, as all good things do. We are confident that the destination is worth the journey and believe we can arrive at a model that will be replicable and directly applicable to other trade environments. It may be the whole model, or it may be parts such as the proof point assessment regime. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we work collaboratively with intent and goodwill to maximize the value of our apprenticeship system, an institution that has been around for many hundreds of years and one that underpins hundreds of thousands of jobs across the economy. After all, if what we're trying to achieve was easy, it surely would have been done by now. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you today and for your participation, and I very much look forward to the next part of this webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Thank you for those insights into what you're doing. I certainly have got a few questions for you, but we'll hold them for a minute. And I do encourage our participants to put a question into the Q&A and the chat, which we will come to after our next speaker. So can I now introduce Miss Michelle Hyde. Michelle has been, or is, Managing Director of North Metropolitan TAFE in Western Australia, one of Western Australia's 5 TAFE regions. Over the last 20 years, Michelle has held a number of senior roles in the vocational education and training sector. Michelle has worked with diverse client groups in regional and metropolitan Western Australia, collaborating across government and the private sector to maximise training opportunities and outcomes. Michelle, in your red background and red jacket, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing some of the things happening in Western Australia with our audience today. Over to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Gavin. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting today. In my case, it's the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Are you actually seeing that on my screen? No, okay, that's good. So just a bit of adjustment on my screen. But yes, to pay my respects and particularly to acknowledge over 60,000 years of culture from which we continue to learn, and the first navigators, horticulturalists, scientists, and passing on skills through generations, which is certainly what we value and still learn from here at TAFE today. And yes, my red background. Oh, sorry, I've actually got my my screen is threatening to shut down. Obviously, it's been quite too long. My marketing team, my fabulous marketing team, decided it'd be a really great thing to showcase the red North Metro TAFE colour. And unbeknownst to me, he decided that maybe it'd be nice to wear my red North Metro TAFE today. So if we give anyone an instant migraine, I apologise. So what I'm going to talk about today is innovative apprenticeship programs that we've got here at North Metro TAFE. But I'm well aware that many of the innovations that we're doing here would be absolutely innovations that we're doing across Australia in all different ways. And some of the examples I talk about, you will also have similar examples, I'm sure. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about, though, is the context. So we are delivering these innovations, I think, in a very different environment. And you know, acknowledge the great work that that Gavin is doing and the MSOP. And I think that some of the principles that you referred to, Gavin, are absolutely ones that reflect what we can do in the current environment to really to make a difference. And I think that all of us are probably in a situation where at the moment it is brilliant to be part of a sector that is so valued by government, valued by industry, and an understanding of how we can leverage our sector capability to contribute to economic and community development and job outcomes and industry productivity. So in a way, I'd like to kind of talk about the context as much as the actual programs. So Lyndall, would you mind just popping up the slides now? Are we good to go? Thanks. So just quickly, just a bit to put it in context, just so you know who we are. So just a bit about North Metro TAFE, that's kind of roughly our size. You can see the comparisons with other TAFE colleges across Australia. We've got about 33,000 students, about 1,500 staff, and that's kind of the size of our budget and operations. Obviously, commercial revenue, like everyone, is a little bit on the downside at the moment. Also, just for your information to understand our positioning here in Western Australia, obviously different TAFE colleges have kind of key areas of focus, but in terms of the context of the programs that I might be focusing on today, the flagships for North Metropolitan TAFE I've just kind of listed there. We've kind of got six key areas. Oh, Lyndall might need to just go to the next slide, thanks. We've got 6 key areas. Because I won't spend too much time on this, but our key focus areas, our flagships are cyber security. Obviously, we're co-located with Edith Cowan University here in Western Australia, who have hosting the cyber security CRC. Direct client care is a key area for us. Mining, obviously. Metronet and civil infrastructure. Lyndall just might pop to the next slide. Renewable energy is a very big focus for our East Perth campus, and creative industries, which also for us at the moment is a high priority. Particularly, we have a city deal happening at the moment, and ECU is building a big centre co-located very near to where our campus is in the city with the creative industries focus. So that's just kind of a bit of background about North Metro, because talking to Jenny earlier, I know that part of these TAFE talks was really about us kind of getting to know each other and looking at the different TAFE colleges' environments. So innovative apprenticeships here in Western Australia and at North Metro TAFE. I guess I've just got a few key points, Lyndall, if we pop to the next slide, about the context. So when this government came in prior to COVID, we had the WA Jobs Plan, and that was very much putting the vet sector front and centre about our ability to deliver to economic development and job outcomes. And part of that was absolutely about driving through levers such as tuition fees, lower fees, local skills courses that were really aligned to areas of economic opportunity in Western Australia. So we had already started that positioning, which has since escalated. Diversify WA was another big context for the innovation of our apprenticeships and starting to put the pressure on us to actually look at what we're offering to the industries that are really emerging in Western Australia and which we need to invest for the long term, because over here we are crucially aware of our dependence on the mining and resources sector, and we love that sector, but we absolutely know that we can't have all our eggs in one basket. So part of it is about the flow-ons and other opportunities there are to build around the success of that sector for Western Australia. So I think that environment created a lot of interest in new products and new designs for apprenticeships. COVID hit, of course, and then we had the Skills for Recovery, which included some innovation around fee-free skills sets and additions to the local lower fees local skills courses, and once again an environment for innovation that we've never had before. I think it's not just the environment for innovation with our industry partners and with government, but also I think in terms of my capability as an organisation, like I'm sure the rest of you, the interest from our entire lecturing cohort in exploring innovative and new strategies was, absolutely there, and in ways that I guess on scale, I've never seen the amount of interest in doing things differently. So, we're in a unique situation at the moment. So I guess I've got there that a new context for training sector engagement has absolutely been what the outcome of that is. Most recently, by way of further example, our Premier hosted a skills summit in Western Australia, and you may have had similar ones. But at that skills summit, we had all our key industries represented. It was held at a key location in Western Australia. We had a series of round tables, and nearly all our ministers of government were in attendance and hosted each of the tables about different industry areas. And TAFE had a place at those tables. And it was just absolutely brilliant because it was a focus on what were the barriers, what were the skill shortages, what were the innovations that industry wanted to see, and the appetite to work collectively. And Gavin, you made one of the points earlier about co-design. So I think that as never before, we're in a position to serve government, serve industry, serve business, as well as not forgetting the wonderful students and careers and aspirations that we're all passionate about being able to contribute to people's learning journeys for. So the quick ones that I'm going to have a chat about fall into a few different categories in line with that context. So the first one is really about leveraging public infrastructure for jobs, diversity and recovery. So Lyndall, can we just pop to the next slide? So I'm just going to give you 3 quick examples here. MetroNet, which is obviously a massive infrastructure commitment by government, and I know is also happening elsewhere. A key element of that is our Nala Biddy strategy, which is about engagement with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and COVID recovery fee-free skill sets. So the first example, and we'll just talk to the next slide. The first example as part of MetroNet is the Alstom project. Alstom won a $1.3 billion contract to locally manufacture and maintain trains for Perth's growing rail network. They're also committed to the Nala Biddy strategy. So this first program is really about using skill sets, rail skill sets, to provide a pathway to apprenticeship for employment. And that's been just incredibly kind of successful to provide an environment and a context where we're really increasing diversity and employment opportunities and pulling people into apprenticeship pathways that might not otherwise have achieved them. So just the next slide, Lyndall, thanks. So the Alstom project is essentially 2 infrastructure skill sets, electrical or fitting and machining, you can see there. It involves paid employment for 10 weeks, which is a critical element. PPE is provided, on-the-job experience. Alstom employment reference is an outcome, credit towards apprenticeship studies, and an opportunity to gain full-time employment as an Alstom apprentice. So one of the things that I think is a unique opportunity that TAFE has is that we are a culturally safe environment. Generally, we have got, I'm sure all of us have got amazing, I know we've got our Coolak Centre here for Aboriginal Studies. We have an amazing team that have great connectivity to community. And I think that allows us to provide pathways and communications into community about what the opportunities are that organisations such as Alstom might not be as well informed or experienced in how to really engage and attract people. So this pathway program has been a really important element to ensure that we're getting representation and employment outcomes and diversity in our growing rail capability in Western Australia. So that's kind of been a great one. Partnerships to improve industry. Oh, sorry, Linda, let's pop to the next slide. I guess another key area that we've been focusing on is partnerships to improve industry productivity and speed of skills to the labour force, which at the moment with skill shortages everywhere, Gavin, I think you alluded to that as well. It's critically important that the way that our apprenticeships are delivered is enabling pipeline of workers to meet the very real needs that we have as soon as we can. Although I take your point, and it's absolutely our concern too, that it's about design, not compression. So our 3 kind of key examples there are about, we have BHP Future Fit Academy, which I know is also happening in Queensland with CQ. Flexible mortar trades, which is not a new concept, but one that has probably been reinvented. And our Sodexo Art of Food project. So just quickly to go on to those, then we'll just pop to the next slide. So our BHP Future Fit Academy is once again around attracting people into the pathway. We have, it's also a twinned program, as I said, with CQ. We have maintenance trainees and mechanical fitting apprentices. And BHP have built specialised facilities that replicate the operating mine sites. We have delivery with BHP staff, subject matter experts, as well as NM lecturers and undertaking assessment overseen. And it is, I guess, an evolving and somewhat organic and flexible environment in which that co-design is really critically important to create quality outcomes in a really kind of successful way, and that maximises productivity for BHP and reduces downtime while ensuring that all of the appropriate competencies can be achieved. Then the next slide is about flexible mortar trades. Once again, as I said, not an unusual kind of scenario, but one that has been reinvented for the constant changes to our operating environments. So this is an area that is dominated by very small, medium-sized organisations employing apprentices, and so that maximum flexibility is required. So, we've got the drop-in classes for the bad weather, a lot of self-paced, we've got on-site, we've got that whole flexibility and movement around fitting our delivery around the productivity and the job environment, the jobs environment of the small employers. Moving on to Sodexo, Lyndall. The Art of Food project, the skill shortages of chefs are unbelievable. Not just Sodexo does a lot of work at the mining camps, but we've actually had approaches from many of the health campuses and major hospitals in Western Australia because they're as desperate for chefs as anybody, as the number of beds they're opening up is increasing. But in this one, we have once again co-designed. Sodexo are responsible for the recruitment, but what we're doing is using that pull process to ensure that we're delivering some units in our training kitchen, but that students are getting upfront on-site experience FIFO to ensure that that is actually the environment for them and that they have the capability to cope with a FIFO work context. So this has been, once again, a really important element of responding a wraparound to Sodexo's needs to create that pipeline of workers that they so desperately need. And the next slide, Lyndall, just got some gorgeous photos of some of our participants. And once again, Sodexo doing the recruitment there in that particular exercise. So just the next slide, Lyndall, just to summarise, I think I'm at the end of my 15 minutes. Essentially, some of the principles here, I guess, are ones that, Gavin, that you've also referred to. The environment that we're working in now is that understanding of the economic development focus of the delivery of our skills opportunities and of apprenticeships. The co-design with industry, which is interesting that you have that in your slides, I've got that in mine. Co-design with community is also really important. How do we ensure maximum success and actually get better outcomes than some of those statistics that you referred to earlier? Creating, this is a new one for us, I think. This is one of the ways in which the game has changed. Creating what I kind of call pull, push, pull pathways between labour market, training and employment. So we have the capability and the connectivity to our student cohort and to the public and community to pull people and then push them into a training pathway, which is where we understand from our industry where the employment opportunities and skill shortages are. And we work with government to make those more attractive through funding levers and other opportunities. Then we pull them into employment in partnership with our industry and businesses, and this is a very efficient model, and I think creating much more opportunity and innovation in our delivery models and in our structuring of our apprenticeships. Commitment to diversity is another, I think, incredible outcome that we're seeing and building on for not just our industries and our businesses that we work with, are large organisations. Obviously, there's commitments through government and contracts to participation plans, but, you know, amazing for our student groups and changing the dynamic actually as well of how we undertake our marketing and attraction. And of course, very much assisting with COVID recovery as we, you know, redeploy people into new areas of skills needs or assist industry areas to rebuild in a timely manner, given the shortage of warm bodies that we have here in Western Australia. So that's a kind of a quick overview of some of the things that we're doing here at North Metro TAFE. I'm sure some similarities with other TAFE colleges, but just an exciting and fascinating time to be part of TAFE and working with our government, industry and community sectors. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Michelle. What a great example, lots of great examples of that conversation around co-design in practice. And you covered from the metro transport industry right through to chefs and commercial, but linking into the mining industry. Really interesting examples. I like that pull, push, pull pathways that you've got going there. I think that works really well. We've got a few questions that have been put up, and Gavin, thank you, Gavin. Gavin's been answering them as the questions go. But what we might do now is actually hear a little bit from Gavin on a couple of those questions and then encourage anyone else. And we've got a little bit of time. So if you do want to add a question in, please do so. Gavin, I think there's been a bit of a theme around some questions that are around how do you educate employers to better work with apprentices. Now that theme is in terms of ensuring that employers provide the right environment. And one of the questions was around obstacles that still exist in your industry or around respect can remain a barrier. Others are around actually working with new apprentices. So I think the question is really, what are you doing to educate employers to be able to work with apprentices?
And thank you very much for the question. I think it's a really valid one because it's an industry that, as you noted in the last while, has been elevated in around the respect and the whole self-safety issue on mine sites, recognizing that 2/3 of all mining jobs are in regional and remote Australia. So this is where many people end up actually working. So I think where those jobs are based, there's an opportunity to educate those communities and create those opportunities so that people want to work in this industry. And one of the project hubs that we have is called the Attraction and Retention Hub, and we're building an industry of choice framework. So we're dealing with many of these facets. Of course, an industry where the number of women that work in the industry remains between 13-16%, so something like that, a very low proportion. So I think there's opportunities here to educate not only employers, but also to educate parents, educate learners, educate RTOs about what those pathways actually look like to the industry, what the educational aspects are, how you can obtain it in these new ways that we envisage, it being the on-the-job component, off-the-job component, not compression, of course, the design being flexible, the design being better used by industry. And I think, Jenny, the best answer to that, I feel, is showing by doing. So when we get our ambassadors, the first program that actually puts out apprenticeships that take on this new model for the heavy-duty diesel fitting apprentice, when we see it in this way, I think that others will look to it and say, well, why can't I access the trade in this way? Michelle made an important point about the BHP Future Fit Academy, and it'd be remiss of me just to acknowledge one of our OSMISA board members, Michelle Gibson from BHP, integrally involved in this, and that is to replicate the environment. And I think it's that contextualization when students can actually see the contextualizing of, this is what I'm doing, I can see it here at the TAFE, and I can also do my off-the-job components here at the same time, then immerse myself. I think there's a real benefit to that. And Michelle, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I've seen here in Victoria at the Chisholm TAFE, the Victorian Tunnelling Centre. I think another very good example of how we've been able to replicate as an industry, well, the tunneling industry in this example, replicate this real environment and immerse the students and learners in this, but also make it available for our opportunities that are linked to, health and safety or working from heights. I think there's other things you can do with these co-located facilities.
Thank you, Gavin. A question now for Michelle. One of our participants would like you to talk a little bit more about the drop-in process that you have going.
Yes, essentially it's structured in such a way that the workshops is at our TAFE campus, and essentially on a rainy day, or if there's not work on, instead of structured block release, employers can send their apprentices in on days when they don't actually have work for them. So it's kind of maximising the efficiency and the outcomes that you can get for apprentices during what would be a natural employer downtime period. So it does mean, of course, that the lecturers have been pretty creative and innovative in how they actually structure the workshop environment, because they have to ensure that it kind of caters to a diversity of stages and different activities, so that it kind of matches the level that the apprentices is at and what they would otherwise be doing if they had been scheduled to attend. And also obviously present some timetabling challenges for our lecturers. But on the other hand, the lecturers do love it, that they can fast track apprentices through, that they can be really responsive. The feedback has been fantastic. And what we're finding is about 60% of our employers are accessing that facility.
Thank you. I think that that requires a lot of flexibility, doesn't it, in terms of being responsive to both student and employer. Yeah. And I think that that's really critical in the way in which our whole sector has been able to move. For you both, and this may be perhaps one, maybe a bit more for Michelle, because it's been an age-old one really. There's a question's been put up in non-mining sort of related industries and non-traditional trades, and often they are quite high feminized industries. We tend to move to the trainee model as opposed to the apprenticeship model. Any reflections there on whether that's a good model in terms of the future, and whether in fact an apprenticeship model in some of, say, the care industries might be more effective? So I'm going to ask Michelle first, who's been around the sector for a long time. Then I'll get Gavin from your position, which is perhaps a bit different, to make any reflections on that.
I love that question. That is a dilemma for me. Absolutely. I think, and for the sector, it's a catch-22, isn't it? Because not even in, as you say, some of those more industries that are dominated by women anyway, that's not the only sector. Recently in Western Australia, we actually developed a certificate 2 in welding, which was predominantly aimed at women. And I had that dilemma then, like we're trying to attract more women into male-dominated industries. That was particularly for shipbuilding, and we're developing it at a different level, and what does that say? I really struggled with that. But on the other hand, you can't argue with the success. It's worked. It's brought more women in. And they're getting jobs and employment, and they can, of course, go on and do the full apprenticeship and go on to great successful careers. So I struggle with, perpetuating kind of stereotypes or structural kind of arrangements that enforce lower wages for the gender pay gap, with balancing that out against actually just bringing more women in. So I think it's a toughie. I think that maybe part of it is the mix. I think that there's actually a changing environment anyway. I feel like social change is happening, in a whole range of different spheres that I see. But definitely I'm talking to my marketing team, because I think that the way we market and promote needs to be different. And I think perhaps, the old way of putting out a flyer for apprenticeships with pink on it is not the best way to attract girls anymore. So we do girls in STEM and things like that. But Yeah, I think that's a question. There is in the civil infrastructure space, sorry, taking a long time to answer the question. In the civil infrastructure space, we did actually elevate a Certificate 2 recently to a Certificate 3 because of that status. So should we do it in the female-dominated industries like aged care and that? I think maybe we should definitely look at that.
Gavin, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I take Michelle's point that it has had the outcome of more female participation in using that as the part of the trainee pathway. And I also don't see that there's, it's building that bridge to that point. I think we have a responsibility as an industry to showcase and tell the stories, because I think in part why we don't find many, or an increasing proportion of the workforce being female is in part because they look at it and say, I don't see myself role modeled anywhere else. So I'm in an environment where there it is, I'm seeing all these men here. How do I know that I'm going to be a heavy duty diesel fitter if I don't see other women doing the heavy duty diesel fitting apprenticeship? And that's the pathway. I think we have to celebrate these stories. And I know very recently this week, you might have heard the Women in Resources National Awards were held. And this is all part of that showcasing and celebrating these successes. But awards are one thing, but there's other unsung heroes out there who just love the jobs they do. And how do we tap into their experiences to be part of this industry of choice? And that's one of the things we're building. I did answer it, and I've been trying to answer the questions, by the way, so we don't miss out in the conversation. We are building an industry of choice framework where we're looking to showcase these stories. We're looking to start the pathways a lot earlier. It needs to be started at the school-based level with younger people and getting their impressions as to, well, what are we doing as an industry? What do you think about our industry? And, sadly, people look at the industry and go, I don't know enough about this industry, let alone to make a decision about the job opportunities that are there. So it's up to us to make these stories count. It's up to us to encourage employers to, showcase what it is you can do for trainees, apprenticeships, not just for everyone, but specifically for those underrepresented cohorts who we know will add massive diversity benefits to the organization.
I think it's a really interesting point you make there, Gavin, because it is very much about that three-way partnership, isn't it? It is about, or four in some ways, you at the association level driving a macro perspective, the TAFE being able to be the provider, the student and the apprentice working together, but then the employer being able to take all of those perspectives in a very positive, respectful and student-focused or apprentice-focused direction. I think that's absolutely critical. Gavin, there is a question in the chat, which I'm from Tony, which I'm just having it's quite a it's quite a complex question. So I think the essence of the question, which you began your presentation to some extent around, which was around the notion of achieving through design and not compression. The essence of the question is around the nature of work is so complex now, and there's been a similar question asked somewhere else, that there are many, many challenges in terms of technology, there are broad applications. Is there a risk that as you move to shorter apprenticeships where competency has been demonstrated, which is what I heard you say, is that you're describing just-in-time training that would move into just a single aspect of work? Or what is the perspective of the Mining Skills Organisation in terms of that approach to shorter apprenticeships?
Yeah, well, again, it's shorter apprenticeships or accelerated apprenticeships by design, not compression. So I think it's about recognizing those components which the employer puts emphasis on to say, I want these things done early. So the proof point assessment assists with that as a process. I think it linked to the contextualization as well, if I might answer it in that way, because to say, a heavy duty diesel fitter in the context of the resources industry might not use all the aspects, of the other things that make it the national apprenticeship. So there's things I think that contextually we can build in and then still build up through, other shorter skill. So micro-credentialing is the word that comes to mind, but that's not the right term here. But I think the answer there, it's contextual for the particular job in this case. So it's not, I don't believe at all it's a shortening, and yes, if we're starting to streamline it down towards specifically, going to, so I'm getting myself tongue-tied here, But in the way described, I think it's the contextualization. I might have to leave it at that because I will try to get back to the person who asked the question. I think, Tony, you said, we do take it an offline conversation because it's very complex, to answer in like the 30 seconds that we have left.
And I think that's in the chat. Look, we have run out of time, everybody, today for questions. Gavin will probably just have a quick look at the Q&A in the chat and he'll respond to you. So if you stay online, you can read Gavin's response.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Can I please warmly and thank both Gavin and Michelle for fabulously stimulating presentations. You gave us an insight into both an industry and a state and the responsiveness of what you're doing in Western Australia to manifold different industries. I think you've done an outstanding job at sharing those concepts. So thank you very much. There was a question as well that was about completion. So I just want to remind all our participants today that in 2 weeks' time, at the same time, we will have phase 2 of our apprenticeship TAFE talks, and that will be focusing on completions for apprentices. It is true that completions are low. We will have Assistant Minister Howarth joining us, whose focus is on youth, and he will be opening that presentation. We'll be joined then by 2 members of the apprenticeship networks, Diane Dayhu and Ben Barden. We will also have the National Careers Institute join us at that session, and Grant from TAFE, the CEO of TAFE, Grant Doher, will actually talk about Tasmania's approach to completion of apprenticeships as their outcomes have been really strong. So that's a really full session, 2 weeks today. Can I once again thank both our speakers? We give you a virtual clap. Thank you for joining us. We are on time at 3, just after 3. We really appreciate your time, and thank you to all our participants for being part of TAFE Talks today. That's it. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.